Hello everyone, I'm Zina ABDULLA. I'm doing a PhD in the UK. I think there's a general consensus here that parks are good. They're a very positive thing. They help with climate change, with mitigating the problems of climate change. They're great for the urban heat island effect, and they're great for human health. So in general, people would say more parks, right? That would fix a lot of problems. And I'm here to talk about if that's enough. Is it just a problem of quantity? Is it a problem of providing the right areas? Or do we need to look even more further into the use of parks and what makes people use parks? So I'm here talking about the barriers to accessibility to urban green spaces for ethnic minorities. So after COVID or during COVID, the NHS in England, so Public Health England, they declared that 2.1 billion per year could be saved in health costs if everyone in England had good access to green space. And here we're talking about good access and what that is exactly. So there have been a lot of studies on this. So Natural England did the MEAN survey, which was monitoring natural environment engagement of people. And this was a 10-year survey in England. And these were the findings of the survey. So what the survey concluded was that most people experience nature when it's close to home. So those urban green spaces, the local park near your house, is the closest opportunity to engage with nature for most people. The other important thing was that engagement is unequal. Not everyone engages with nature, which means that not everyone is using that local park the same way. Not people are using it as usual, as the rest of the community. And we're here, well, my research was trying to answer the question, why? And also, there are many different reasons and barriers why people are not using these parks the way they should or the way that they could to their full potential. And I'm trying to figure out, or I try to figure out what those barriers are. There are standards, of course, when it comes to natural green spaces and parks. So these were Natural England standards, and they say that no person should live more than 200 meters from their nearest area of half a hectare and 300 meters from a green space of at least 2 hectares in size. But then I looked at what the statistics say when it comes to engaging with the natural environment. And if you have a look, the top graph is the white community, and the bottom graph is the ethnic minorities. And this survey showed, in addition to the Office of National Statistics in the UK, showed that ethnic minorities engage with green spaces a lot less than the rest of the community, a lot less than the white community in the UK. And this was creating a problem because they were already minorities, they were already a vulnerable group of people, and adding to these barriers created more health problems and more health risks. So I had a look at, was it a matter of accessibility? Was it a matter that they didn't live close enough to these spaces? So according to the Office of National Statistics, no, they do live close to these spaces. On average, they live closer than the white community to parks. So wherever they are living, they do have access to these green spaces. There is a park close by, but they're not using it as often as the rest of the community, as often as the white community in the UK. And this is why I tried to figure out what their barriers were. So what we did was, I did a study in the city of Bristol in the UK. The reason I chose Bristol is because it's a quite diverse community. It has a very, very diverse collection of ethnicities. And it was a very interesting place to look at. It's a really green city. They have a lot of parks, so it was the perfect place to look at this study. So what we did first was an online survey. We wanted to understand how people use parks in general in the city of Bristol. And then we did focus groups. The focus groups were for ethnic minorities to talk about these barriers. And then we did a participatory design. Because my background is in architecture, and the way I look at things is, can we design these spaces to accommodate more use? Can we design them to be more inclusive? Can we design them to be equitable for all groups of the community? So these were the survey results. We got 243 responses, and we got quite a diverse group of people. So this was for the general public. So anyone could answer this survey as long as they lived in the city of Bristol. So this is the map of Bristol, and these are the areas covered by the survey, which means that we got a good representative of the people, of the population of the city of Bristol within this survey. So looking at the survey results, this is household income distribution across ethnicities. So what we wanted to understand was, is there a correlation between deprivation and ethnicities? And it seems like yes. It seems like there are higher levels of deprivation within ethnic minorities, which makes the problem even more difficult, because the more deprived you are, the more you experience health inequalities, and the more problems you probably have with your health. And you really can't afford to take a vacation to deal, whether it's with your physical health or mental health. So that's where your local park becomes even more important. And that's why at the beginning it said that it's the closest opportunity to experience nature is in the local park next to your house. So yes, you can see that the gray is the highest deprivation, so the poorer people, and there's a lot more gray in the ethnic minorities than there is in the white. So yes, they are a lot more deprived. And then I looked at park use. And again, so the first two columns are the white community, whether they were white British or any other type of white individuals, whether they were of European or any other origin. And the rest of the columns are different ethnicities, ethnic minorities. And here, the gray one is less than once a month. And you can see that there's a lot more gray among the ethnic minorities. So this just proves even further what the mean survey was showing, that they do interact with nature in a different way, and some of them don't interact at all. And we also looked at how people use these green spaces, whether it was on an individual basis, whether it was group use or family use, and how that would play a role in accessing green spaces. So this was the answer of ethnic minorities to who do you usually visit the park with. And as you can see, with family members, children, and with friends was a lot higher. And in comparison to the white communities, where using parks individually was a lot higher, or using parks to walk your dog, for example, was a lot higher. So for ethnic minorities, park use came as a group activity more than an individual activity. And this is something that we need to understand when we design these spaces. Another question was non-physical barriers to accessibility. So what are the barriers? And this is something we ask people in general. So the survey wasn't specifically for ethnic minorities, but here we can say that safety was an issue for everyone, no matter what your origin is, no matter what your ethnicity, your skin color, no matter what no matter where you're from. Safety across all ethnicities and across the whole population was the #1 barrier. Of course, there were other barriers of perceived lack of cleanliness and feeling unwelcome and other things that we will dive in a lot deeper with the focus groups. We also had a look at the amenities that people preferred, so what type of amenities people or different groups would use. These were quite similar. Toilets was #1. It seems like toilets is the #1 issue in parks, and from my experience all over the world, looking for a toilet in a park is always an issue, and it can be a barrier for some people, especially who have health conditions. The other one was cafes, picnic tables, and among the desirable amenities, especially for the ethnic minorities, things like group seatings and barbecue places, those were very, very popular. So the conclusions to the survey was there's a significantly higher amount of non-regular users amongst the ethnic minorities. Feelings of unsafety were equally represented, and normally ethnic minorities use parks within a family or group setting. So then we thought we need to look deeper into the barriers that the ethnic minorities are facing. So why are they not using these spaces the way that the rest of the community is? So we wanted to get the right participants. The problem is when we talk about parks, when as a researcher I mentioned that, oh, I'm doing focus groups about parks, people like the people in the room here that were already enthusiastic about nature would, yeah, I'd love to talk about parks, I'd come to your focus group. The problem is, those were not the people that we wanted. We wanted the people that were underrepresented, that didn't have a voice, and that didn't use parks. Those are normally people who were a lot more isolated, that were a lot more just the type of people that would spend more time at home than in a public space. So this was quite of a challenge to find them. So we did these through charity organizations, we did these through word of mouth, just reaching those local groups, putting messages in WhatsApp, and then to sign up you would have to fill a form that asked how often do you use a park, and if the answer was never or once a month, then you'd get the invitation. This was very time consuming, but we did this to get the right people in the room to understand the barriers. We did have project partners, like I said, so we did work with a lot of collaborators and charities in Bristol. We also had the council help us with spreading the word and getting the right people. And these are the people that we reached when it came to the survey. So we couldn't reach the whole areas of Bristol, but we managed to reach the highly deprived areas, which is St. Paul in central Bristol and south of Bristol, and Knowles in east of Bristol. These are the ethnic minorities, so we had a look at every ward and who we were targeting, and we tried our best to have them represented in our focus groups. So we ended up with 5 focus groups, 42 participants in total in 3 different locations. So we had these in local either council houses or local charities to provide that ease of access, so we could target the people in the surrounding area and they could easily travel to the focus groups. And these were the results. So this is something that gets a lot of interest normally, and in the context of the UK, it becomes a very, very sensitive topic. Whenever people talk about dogs, it becomes quite controversial. But yes, for almost all of the focus groups, dogs was the #1 barrier for people, and it was showing in so many different ways. So we had the Pakistani community within our focus groups, and fear of dogs was the #1 barrier for them. And it also materialized within the African community and the Caribbean community when it came to dog feces on the ground and people not picking up after their dogs and being in deprived areas and their parks weren't really cleaned and maintained, so that came as a different barrier. And then for the elderly community, dogs came as a trip hazard, especially for people who had crutches. Of course, there were many barriers, and we will go through them. But this is the word cloud that was produced from the text of the focus groups. And as you can see, dogs was a very, very, very important theme. So these are some of the quotes. So there was an elderly Pakistani lady who said, I don't go to the parks because I don't want to die. There are 2 things that I am really, really afraid of, and those are injections and dogs. If a dog bites me, I'm old, I can't run, I will probably need an injection, and I might end up dead. So this fear is there. It is there. It is within the community. It wasn't only people of Pakistani origin. It was among other different types of the individuals. It was mothers who had children with autism. That became a very, very big challenge for them, just dealing with a trip to the park, even if the play area was surrounded and gated and no dogs were allowed. But it was the issue of arriving to that playground which became a really big challenge for them. Another issue was antisocial behavior. So some people said that they didn't feel welcomed. Some people said that they experienced racism. For the elderly group, especially men, it was provision of teen gangs, so teenagers up to no good. There was this perception that if there's a group of teenagers, then I don't feel safe. So that was also a barrier. Drug use was also a barrier, and people leaving their needles in the grass, and then in the end it would need specialists to come in and cut the grass because of the presence of these needles, and then in the end it wouldn't be cut, so it would just be left there. And of course these problems were a lot more evident in the more deprived areas. Age and gender appropriate activity or equipment. I had a bunch of 18-year-olds in my focus groups, and I was always hearing there's nothing for us to do in parks. The parks are not designed for us. The playgrounds are for toddlers, there are swings, there are slides and things like that. Those are for children under 10. We're older. There are sports grounds, those are dominated by boys. We really don't feel like, as young women, we don't feel like there's a place for us in parks, so we end up not using them, which is a really, really big problem that needs to be addressed and can be addressed by designing parks in a certain way. Playing equipment conditions, so again, because we were focusing on the deprived areas, the more deprived the parks, the worse the condition was. So instead of a trip to the park being a stress-free and a place where you can recharge and rewind, for mothers in particular, it was becoming very, very stressful because they were worried that their children might be injured using this equipment. They were saying that a lot of the parks were like the swings and the equipment were wrapped with gaffer tape and they were broken, and that just creates a lot more stress. Cleanliness, of course, and maintenance was a really big issue. Again, the more deprived the area, the bigger this issue became. And safety was an issue for almost everyone. So people didn't feel safe in parks, especially during the evenings. As you know, in the UK, in winter, the sun sets around 4 p.m., so going through a park becomes very, very difficult. Lighting of the park is always very, very dim or non-existent. Sometimes for reasons of preserving wildlife and not interrupting that cycle, but this becomes a barrier for people who need to walk through these parks. So these are the things that were kind of in common with the focus group. So the first focus group was mostly Asian and Pakistani, and the second one, the majority were Black African and Black Caribbean. And we, because we had most of the focus group participants were women, the last one was focused only on men. And these are the things. So dogs and safety were the two things that were in common with all of the community groups that we worked with. And then we wanted to be a little bit more positive about the discussion. So we brought in the people, we built a model of one of the parks that was close to them, that they knew, that was underused, and we said, okay, now we know the barriers, what can we do? How can we design the parks to address these issues? And there were a lot of ideas, a lot of wonderful ideas that came out of that participatory workshop. If I go through them, I won't be finished until tomorrow. But this is kind of a quick summary of the ideas. So when it came to safety, either designing the hedges in a certain way where you have clarity of vision, where you can see the end of the path and you would feel a lot safer, providing more lighting. When it comes to the issue of dogs, possibly providing dog-free hours, not necessarily dog-free parks, because that might be difficult for dog owners who live close by, but at least dog-free hours that can be integrated into park use. There were lots of really, really wonderful ideas about even putting a monument that would create respect for a park, and they believed that if there was respect, an element of respect for the park, then maybe people wouldn't litter. So if there's a monument, I wouldn't really throw my can of Coke or something right next to it. And of course, creating more flowers, like we saw in the first presentation, that was a really, really popular thing. More color, more flowers in the parks, and not just trees and greenery that doesn't really attract a lot of people. Another thing was group activity and the type of seating areas that would accommodate group activity. So instead of seeing the traditional benches, which don't really accommodate or facilitate group gatherings, having circular benches or having a type of seating that would accommodate people coming together instead of spreading them apart. And this is when we started thinking of, well, I started thinking of defining accessibility. And accessibility has always been defined in the terms of distance. So yes, we have the standards, 200 meters, blah, 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 300 meters, you need to have this, but is that enough? And through my study, I found that no, that is not enough. That is the first step. Providing that green space is only the first step towards making them accessible. So yes, the first step is free entry and proximate. It needs to be close, it needs to be within walking distance, and it needs to be free. Putting a ticket on entrance to a park becomes a really, really big barrier. And then that's when you need to consider physical needs and emotional needs of your users. Are you providing the physical needs? Are you providing the emotional needs? And then we look into tier 2 and tier 3, and this is when we get into more depth. So do I have the fundamental amenities? Do I have toilets? Do I have benches? Do I have a playground? And these are the basics that I would expect to see in park. And then we have the basic or fundamental perceptions. Do I feel safe? If I don't feel safe, even if the park is right outside my door, I will not use it if I do not feel safe in that space. Do I feel welcomed? If I feel like I might be attacked or I might be receiving some unkind comments, I will not use it even if it is outside my door. And then we look at the more desirable amenities and the more desirable perceptions. So if there are picnic tables, if there's a coffee kiosk, if there's a water fountain, these make the place more attractive. And also the desirable perceptions, do I feel ownership? Do I feel represented? Does this space represent me? Do I feel like this is part of my local community? And only then we can truly say that a place is accessible. And then I went on to Poland to see if this was the case in other countries. Is this specific to the UK, or is this a case that can be explored in different countries? So I was lucky to receive a scholarship from Poland to go and study there for 30 days. And I did practically the same thing. Because of the 30-day limit of the time, instead of focus groups, I did interviews with the international community or foreigners, but they were all of ethnic minorities in Poland. Yep. Right. Go on. So I visited the city of Wrocław, and while I was there, I did a quick analysis of the green spaces, and again, it doesn't really meet the standards, but it is considered a very, very green city, and there was an affluence of green spaces. So again, what I tried to do was I tried to identify foreign communities, international student community at the university that was hosting me. I also tried to contact the international mosque community and the international church community, just to get to the people who are part of the community but are not necessarily the majority. We did outreach to these communities through social media, through WhatsApp groups, and through word of mouth. And then I tried to identify non-regular users. Again, because of language barriers, you normally get people who, oh, I love parks, I would love to do the interview. Like, sorry, we would really, that would be of value, but we are trying, the majority at least of the interviewees should be people who are not using parks. So I ended up doing 16 semi-structured interviews, and I tried to invite them over coffee and cake. So the ethnicities covered were Arab, Turkish, South Asian, Persian, Filipino, and Taiwanese. We had 14 females and 2 males. 6 of them were regular users of park, again, because of the lack of communication and the language barrier, because I speak English, and then English wasn't the main language in Poland. But still, we had 10 non-regular users and 6 regular users, so it was good to understand the difference between them. And the barriers here became a little bit more different. So antisocial behavior, as you can see, is definitely one of the reasons I stay away from parks in the evenings. I'm aware of drunk people and weird people. I see them go to the parks at night. If you look Arabic or foreign, people are scared and you are sitting there alone. I'm afraid of racism. I don't have a relationship with parks in Wrocław, mostly because I am afraid. So within these 16 interviewees, two of the women that I interviewed had been physically attacked, not in parks, in public spaces within towns, but they had been physically attacked. They had been hit with a bottle of, I think, vodka, as one of them described, on the head from behind. And within 16 people, 2 of them had this issue. So yes, antisocial activity and safety was a very, very big and major barrier for a lot of them. There was also emotional reasons. So going to the park makes me feel like I don't belong here. I'm not a member of a social group. I don't have a lot of friends. Again, because they prefer group activity, most of these people were there either for work, so they were there on an individual basis. They didn't have their families. They didn't have big social groups. So going to a park became a challenge for them. And safety, of course. I don't feel safe in the evening. I never go out late. In winter, I avoid dark, empty spaces. In winter, people seem to avoid parks completely, at least the people I interviewed. Yep, so there were also extreme weather conditions because of the cold winters. Again, people really avoided parks completely. So as you can see, in winter, I can't go out. It's too difficult. In winter, it's impossible. So people would never really use parks. Insects came up as a barrier in Poland, so this was a new thing that was never mentioned in the UK. So there are a lot of mosquitoes, there are a lot of insects, and there were people who had allergies to insects or needed to use insect repellent, and that was a barrier that came up specifically in Poland. And of course, amenities, not having a place to wash your hands, toilets. My husband used the toilet due to a health condition, and there are not a lot of toilets, and that was something I heard all the time, that sometimes even if they do know where the toilet is, accessing it, you might need a coin to access it. If you're not carrying any coins or cash, then it's difficult, and then once you access it, if it's not clean, if it's not maintained, it becomes really difficult. So the conclusions of this study was that barriers exist for vulnerable groups and ethnic minorities, and they differ according to context. So these barriers are different from the ones from the UK. So there was no mention of dogs. When I asked about dogs in Poland, all the interviewees said there's not a problem, they're well behaved, their owners always keep them on a lead, and it didn't become a problem for them at all. So you can see how context changes the barriers, and this is why when a park is designed or redesigned, it is very important to look at the demographic it serves. So who are your users, and what are their problems, and what are their needs? And no park should, well, not all parks should be created equal. I design a park for the demographics that it serves. So yes, these barriers need to be understood. In order to be addressed, we need to change the way we think about accessibility to include non-physical barriers. Strategic planning policies, by design solutions need to be put in place to mitigate these barriers and make spaces truly inclusive and accessible. And thank you very much.